All right, well, I guess we'll get started here. Welcome everyone back to the Finding Paths. It's our stream for the art of game mastery on everything Pathfinder and a lot of times some other stuff as well. Um, Today we're going to be doing something a bit different. We're going to be talking a little bit about map making and how each of us go about it in different ways. We have kind of opposite approaches to it, so I think it'll be an interesting exercise to take a look at how each of us do it and maybe learn a thing or two about it. Um, we, I guess, before we get started on going each of our individual ways, we should talk a bit about what goes into map making. There's different kinds of maps. First of all, there's your typical dungeon maps, your battle maps, your village maps, maybe your world maps, which are can be different levels of zoomed out, how zoomed out you are. It could be anything from like a video game style Japanese RPG world map, like Jack tends to prefer, or it could just be a hex map that has general high level sections of the area that players can know what hex they're in to know exactly where they're at. It could be just a general, more cartography style world map, like kind of like you see of the world, for instance, where it's more of a visual representation of the overall lay of the land and less of exactly where the player is at any given time. So there's different kinds of maps you can create there. Today, I'm going to be going over how I create dungeon maps, while Jack, I believe, is going to talk about how they create village maps, right, Jack?
That's right.
Yeah. So we're going to start with my dungeon maps because I may have to dip out a little early. We have some things going on that I might have to dip out and join in on. But for now, let's see how far we can get without it. So let's switch over here to software I use called Dungeon Draft. Dungeon Draft is nice because there's several map making tools out there, and all of them are great. They all have different pros and cons. I like Dungeon Draft because it outputs to a format called Universal Battle Map format. And there is a plugin for Foundry, which is my virtual tabletop of choice, that lets you import Universal Battle Map maps into Foundry directly, and it handles creating all the lighting and the walls and everything for you. So it really streamlines that process for me. And the other nice thing about Dungeon Draft, when it comes to dungeons in particular and caves also, is that it has this really cool tool for procedurally generating either dungeons or caves depending on what you want. You can kind of choose your different floor tiles and your wall tiles and everything. So what I have here is a map I generated, a very small map I generated quickly ahead of the stream, using standard stone tile and stone walls. And I even added a little staircase going down to show where the entrance would be. Typically, when you're designing a dungeon map, one of the first things you want to do is determine what this dungeon is going to be used for. And sometimes this isn't as clear cut of an answer as you might think. Like sometimes you want your dungeon to be pretty generic in that you can toss it in anywhere in your campaign and it doesn't really matter exactly where it's at. So that makes things a little more difficult. But so most of the time you know exactly what your dungeon is going to be used for, or at least the general theme you want to go with for it. In this case, I think we're going to go with something like barracks. It's a common dungeon you might find, maybe some ancient civilization, and this is the barrack area of it. So what are some things you might find in a barrack? Well, you would have, a boarding area where people would stay and live, basically, when they're, camping out and whatnot. You would have an
Yeah.
armory where
Quarters.
you would keep their weapons and arms and armor when they're not using them. You might have a small prison area where you keep people they have captured, prisoners of war, for instance. And you probably have some kind of dining area slash larder or something. So let's take a look. Let's take a look at this. So one of the first things I like to do when I'm making a map is try to figure out how I can make the area interesting, aside from just your typical beds and furniture and whatnot. So um, usually one of the first things I do is I start to plot out lights. So let's go here to the object tool and or I believe it's called Sconce. Sconce is in here. So I'll grab like one of these guys. It doesn't particularly matter what color I pick, I don't think, but we'll go with just the standard. Um, let's rotate it a bit here. Actually, start down here. So you think about this, people are probably going to put lights around doorways, right? It's probably a pretty common one. And they're probably not going to, in fact, they're probably only going to have, this is a small-ish room, so they're probably only going to have one or two in here. And that, we'll get to lighting later, but that'll probably be, if you think of a 20-foot radius on a light, that's going to be cover this whole room, basically. They probably wouldn't light the hallways too much in older times. They would typically run the light from the doorway areas here. So you have one there probably. In this room, you might have one, up here. You might have one down here.
Is that little torch thing you just like automatically detect where the wall is?
No, it's got grid snap on it, so the walls are along the grid, so it
Like go to the right side of the map, like the right side of the wall.
yeah, I'm over here now.
Okay, so it doesn't rotate.
No, you have to automate. I'm rotating with the mouse wheel.
Mm.
So yeah, you put one over here, and maybe put one. This is a fairly large room, so I have one there. Maybe another one down here, and there's probably going to be some like corners over here that maybe not won't get the most light, but they should be dim enough of light to get through. Here, you probably want one right here, right here. The next thing I kind of think about is I try to think about objects that aren't furniture that players can hide behind or take cover around. If you think about it, this dungeon's underground, so it's probably going to have something that's supporting its larger rooms, like the ceilings of the larger rooms. A common thing you might find in a stone dungeon are things like pillars, right? So
Unless the ceilings are domed.
unless the ceilings are domed, true. And
I
this,
noticed that a lot of like I think beholders they like to specifically design their ceilings to be flat surfaces, this to prevent like javelin tossing.
mm-hmm.
But if it's made by another species or something, having convex or concave ceilings always something to consider.
Exactly. And I mean, there's different kinds of pillars too, right? There's decorative ones, there's structural ones, etc. So something like this would probably be more of a decorative style pillar, but it could be structural as well, depending on how it's set up. Something like this is probably going to be more decorative. It's probably not going to be super structural, but
It's hiding behind your image, so maybe put it onto the map. So yeah, there we go.
Yeah, so something like this is going to be kind of like could be decorative, could be a bit structured as well. I'll move that in a second, but something like this is probably going to be more decorative and not really super structural, just because of all the bells and whistles it has on it. But then, like something like this is going to be super structural. It's just like it's got a purpose, and that purpose is to hold this ceiling up. So kind of think about, what kind of pillars you like to use and what they represent. In this case, it's a barracks, so they're not going to be going for decoration too much. They're going to be more function over form. So they probably have something like this, maybe square pattern there.
Nice.
And what are these rooms? Well, this is probably this is a very large room, so this is probably going to be like a dining area of some sort. I would think. Either one of these could be. In fact, this one over here might actually be something like the dormitory area, where this might be the dining area, because when the people enter, they're going to go up this hallway and pretty much immediately come into the dining area. So I think making this the dining area might be the best. I don't know what we're going to do with this quite yet. This might be, I don't know, maybe the captain's quarters or something.
That could be the prison.
What was that?
That could be a good prison.
Yeah, I was gonna say this or this could be a prison. Yeah, maybe put the prison here and the armory here, and then the dormitory here, and the eating area here. That sounds reasonable to me. So let's start looking at some furniture here. So let's do some beds. These are all. I'm using the Forgotten Adventures tile set. There's a lot of free ones on there. If you're a Patreon member, you can also get a bunch of extra stuff too. I don't have all of them loaded in here, but so kind of a thing of suspension of disbelief here is that if this is an old ancient ruin, you're probably not going to have these textiles still existing. They're probably going to have deteriorated by now. But we can,
You can assume that maybe some orcs or some barbarians
yeah,
have used it in the following years. So maybe you've got layers of history going on in here.
yeah. So maybe something like, I don't know, maybe just some basic mats here. And then maybe a couple of them had some chests that contain their personal items. Or not, because I can't find them in the search. I might not have it loaded in. We'll add chests later. This isn't actually a way to show how you can kind of add some stuff into Foundry to make it a little more interactive. So yeah, we add some prison cells here for the. Actually, I think it's called cage. There's some cages
Which
here.
one is the rotunda?
What was that? Use some just basic cages here with put some skeletons in there. Show that someone died. Just like a torso, just a line in there with
Nothing like a menacing prison to have some skeletons in it.
maybe some. Oops. Actually, let's put this under.
You'd think people would like clean out their jail cells, but no.
It's not always the top of the priority list for a lot of people.
Humane living conditions? Nonsense.
There's some bones in here. Put a skull down. Yeah, something like that. We're just kind of doing this real quick and dirty just to show it. And then, what do we say this one was? The armory. So there's also like some weapon racks, I believe, in here somewhere. Yeah, maybe some are full, some are empty, right? So it looks like a wall-mounted one.
I mean, this looks like a traditional dungeon you'd find in like Elder Scrolls.
Yeah.
And this is just a real quick setup.
Yep. There's probably
This is
going to be
really
something
a
in the middle
pretty
here.
fast.
This is a wall-mounted one. Let's put it like right there. And maybe.
So once you add all of these assets into Foundry, none of them can really be configured with because it's going to save it as like a file, correct?
Correct. This is all going to be part of the map essentially. Now, like I said with the chests, I'm going to give an example of how you could add those in Foundry to as interactive items on top of whatever map. So when I'm making maps, I'll usually decide which things I want the players to be able to directly interact with, and which things I want them to be more like just part of the background. Like maybe if there was like a corpse or something, right? That of somebody the player was looking for, I might make the corpse a tile in Foundry so the player can pick up the corpse and take it with them. So next time they come in here, it's gone, kind of deal. Yeah, I mean, you get the general idea. I won't go too far with this because we got a certain amount of time for this. But so let's go and export this. So I'm exporting these universal VTT, and I actually want to disable the grid because I want the Foundry grid to take precedence here.
That's smart.
So export this. Save that demo. takes a second. I think it did it. We'll go into Foundry in a second. And so from here, if I go to the Scenes tab in Foundry, just Universal Battle Map Importer button, I can do this, call it map demo, and then choose a file here, and I will choose
You're
the
not going to
thing.
use this dungeon in your game?
What was that?
But you're not going to use this dungeon in your game?
Maybe we'll see.
Oh man.
This is a blank game I created just for demo purposes, so I can always add it in another game later. Let's see, where'd I put it though? That's the question.
I really like how just easy that was to do.
Or what I forgot to add in there was lights, like I said we would. But say here's the map it created. Um, you can export it at different resolutions to get higher quality and whatnot. But if I would have added these lights in Foundry, for instance, or I mean Dungeon Draft, for instance, it would have automatically added them here. So like I can go ahead and set them up here if I want to. So there's going to be some darkness out here in the corner. Actually, this is actually incorrect. It should actually be a bright light radius of 20. Change the I don't know why the light is like color is that, but
You're changing the color of the light right now.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why I defaulted to black, but
Black light, because you know that's the most common dungeon color.
yeah, I mean you get the idea. You can add lights and whatnot. And like here, if I wanted to add chests, I've already uploaded some of these forgotten assets to so you see it added all the walls and everything automatically for me. So light doesn't go through them and whatnot. But if I wanted to add like a chest here, I could load in which one of these is which, but we'll go with this. Just why not? So I forget how to rotate, and
Foundry. Hmm.
so something like that. I mean, you could. This isn't the right icon for it. I have better ones in there, but this is an example of how you could put like a little chest here, and then players could approach the chest. And if you're using like the pickup sticks add-on, which is currently not working with Pathfinder 2e, last I checked, then but if you're using like 5e or something, it works fine with it. But you could actually put a container down on the uh, onto this chest so that when a player actually approaches it, they can open the container and take the items that were in it and automatically add it to their inventory. So things like that you could do. You can also, I mean, players can go in and click to. Actually, I think the GM has to do it, but the GM could come in and click to turn off the lights. It's a dungeon. Lights probably aren't on to begin with, but maybe the players have a torch. They could come in and light it to add some light to the area. They might not light all of it, so that, for instance, if in here, I believe it. Okay, I didn't add walls around. Something else I should have done in Dungeon Draft was add walls around the pillars.
So how
So,
did you add the walls ahead of time? Was that part of Dungeon Draft? Like
so
when it
when it
saved?
procedurally generates a dungeon, it automatically adds the walls. But you can also do add walls in Dungeon Draft as well. I just didn't do it. But you can also add walls here. So, like if say I came in here and created just the basic So now if I add a light here, see how it ignores that, right?
Nice.
So if I put, I don't have a, he's, doesn't have vision, so he's in the light right now, but he can't see around here. But he could go around here, here, here. It's actually, seems like a lighting system foundry might be messed up, because he should be able to see here. Uh, oh, but
That's
he
it.
doesn't have vision, so yeah, that's why.
He's blind.
He's blind, yeah.
Can I get I have dark vision in the chat?
Yeah. Actually, I don't have the plugin enabled for that, but um, you get the idea. So you could kind of customize your maps, make them interactive with people, and have some fun with it. I don't want to take up too much time though, because I know Jack's got a quite an intricate approach as well that he'll want to show you. So
My process is a little more laborious.
Yeah.
But it's you're using a lot of lifetime saving techniques, whereas I'm still a little old school, maybe, struggling in my ways. Okay, so I'm in roll 20, and we're going to start off with just a simple map. In roll 20, the best way to access most of your stuff, you got your page toolbar. When you click on a map, it'll take you there. It's not necessarily going to take the players there. You got to drag your players in there, so that's like the map that they see when they go in there. And then a little finicky, but let's call this town town town. Yes, the town of town.
I like it.
And if you like walk away from this area, it will not save. You have to hit enter to save it. It's pretty specific that way. The cogwheel, you've got a lot of options here from if you want to use the dynamic lighting. I'm actually paying for roll 20, and you can set the width and the height here. And what I've found is that the width is a bit different than the height. The squares are not like necessarily going to display as squares. It's kind of like your monitor size. Most monitors are a bit wider than they are taller, unless you've got like a what do you call those things, John?
Curve monitor?
No,
Or,
the like the laptop.
oh,
Here's a word for
tablet?
it. Tablet. Thank you. So let's go ahead and make this town a little bit taller than wide. I'm gonna go ahead and save these settings. You can see like already, like just like how it shows up. You can see pretty big to start with. Um, Next basic thing, set the color for your background. We're gonna do a nice happy town, so let's choose like a simple color green. Um, the cell distance, this right here is how you mess with your players. If you want the cell distance to be 10 foot,
God, no!
then when you measure
Oh.
in roll 20, this will now display it properly. Instead of it being every 5 feet per square, it's going to be 10 feet per square. This is really useful for when you're doing really zoomed out maps. If you're doing something like the Grand Canyon, that's an appropriate time to do it. Normally, if you're doing it in a town, probably not appropriate. If you like to change the hexes, you got your V and your H style hex.
So
Ultimate's got a lot
vertical and
of
horizontal. Gotcha.
those things. So when I'm making a town, I'm almost always just going to stick in the square. I'm not going to change the opacity of the grid, and I'm just going to dive right into a town. So first thing, check your layer. I always want to be on map layer. I'm going to do some basic walls. I'm going to stick with regular for the thickness of my pencil. I'm going to be in the draw shape. I'm going to be doing just boxes and circles. Probably get most everything I need with just those basic shapes. I like to do black for an outline, kind of give that pencil in feel. I'm used to drawing all my maps. So I'm going to start off with, just to give you an idea of like what a simple house is going to be looking like. We're do a top down. So just going to be dragging and dropping these on here. So start off with some basic And then to give it a little bit of a different feel, we're gonna most of these are very easy to manipulate. You just drag and adopt like what size you want to kind of cover them up. Um, one of the harder things to use is the layering. If you drop an item underneath something with front to back, it can like disappear, especially if you're using a lot of layers. I tend to use lots and lots of layers. An example of using lots of layers is, let's see, what's a good tile roof and a happy town. We're going to do like a nice red looking color. We're going to put this on here. Now I'm on the map area, so I'm going to go ahead and do a layer. I'm going to put this on the token layer. The players, when they see this in an undiscovered area, it's just going to see a blob. We can set that so that way later on, I don't want them to see that at all on this layer. This layer can go to the GM layer, and then when we drop down tokens, they're not going to see any of this stuff at all. That can be kind of like the last phase that you're doing when you're making a top-down house. So let's start off with a nice rural path. Kind of do a nice dark
So
outline.
is that square in the center? Like, so you have
Totally
those 3 lines going through it. Is that square in the center of the floor, or?
right. Should feel like wood patches. So if you want to do more detail on the
Oh, I
wood,
see. So that entire thing is the floor. Gotcha.
pretty much. So let's do like a small doorway, entryway.
I see.
And then if we want to elongate the walls, we can kind of give them a solid surface to work with here. So top down can be fairly precise because if you look at the grid sizing right here, if you move a character into this area, they're going to automatically try to like fit in one of these spots. And then for this door, maybe this door, I want to keep this door on the token layer.
So what's the token layer used for?
So the token layer is going to always be on par with the players. So if the players drop in their tokens, they're going to be in the same layer as the tokens.
Gotcha. Okay.
They can never be beneath the map layer. So when players drop in, they're always going to be above that.
Gotcha.
The token layer is useful because when you're playing the game, when you're managing it, you're going to probably be on the object layer at all times. And you don't want to go into the map layer unless you need to change the map layer, like mid-game. Hopefully you don't ever get to that. I know you guys have had some experiences where I moved an entire river while you guys were still on it. So nobody liked being on a river that moved while they were still on the river. So I've got a basic path going here, and all I've done is selected just the freestyle hand. I used a little bit darker brown to kind of give it an outline, lighter brown on the inside. That's a regular thickness. I want to go thinner, and let's create like a bit of brush or underbrush. This green is already selected for the background, so I'm going to have a dark green followed by a lighter green. And you can kind of see some of the brush strokes that you do if you're using textures here. If you just do a straight line, you're going to get no foreseeable shading to go with it. It's as soon as you start curving that you're going to fill it in. And you can kind of work with that there. If you're looking for some kind of grass to have multicolor layering, this is just if you want to do all of the drawing by hand. So like your guys' game in Tagastia, you guys have a lot of underbrush, and then you guys are moving on about 10, 15 feet above all the underbrush on different lane highways. So I've had to show some of those things by separating them. Now, let's say nearby we're going to have a nice little pond and a happy little village. So we're going to have.
So what kind of things do you consider when you're designing your villages and like determining what's going to go in there, what kind of geographical features are there, etc. Like, so, when you're making a village, what kind of thought process do you have?
I have it's a racing amount of thoughts. So to start, I'm gonna be thinking about what the level of the town is. That's gonna be probably my first go.
Hmm.
What's the level? Um, if I'm doing a starting zone, I do not want to make that central hub have everything available to the players, because I feel like then the players will have no reason to like leave
Hmm.
unless I'm doing a mega dungeon style. But mostly I do traditional sandbox style games, and so when doing traditional sandbox style games, I want my players to be motivated to explore the world. So right off the bat, they can't find everything in the starting area. So
Hmm.
I'm going to think about some things that they're going to be lacking in. Um, I actually want to change the color of that. That doesn't look right. Let's do. hmm, Okay, so this is on this little doorway I just made. It's on a different layer. I'm going to leave it like slightly askew. It's going to feel more like a closed door that doesn't close all the way. And um, so I showed you how to do the kind of like the basic boxing. A little bit of circles kind of goes a long way. Circles can add a lot of texture. There's like minimum sizes that you can do in Roll20. If you hold the Alt key down, you're going to get these little perfect circles. They look really good for making cobblestones. And then let's change up the color vector. So now and I'm just basically creating a nice soft texture so that players can see this is clearly a path that they can like step out and walk on. So we're going to be about usually going to be playing around 60 to 100% zoom when players are looking at something. If they feel the need to like zoom all the way out so they can see the whole map, then that texture is just going to look a little richer. I like to do so in this particular town that we're making. Let's say this is a level 1. Probably going to make there be a blacksmith, and he's going to be able to make up to level 1 items. So I want to give him some basic stuff, and he's going to stand out from a shoddy style built house to much more precise dimensions. Um, Especially like if I want to make like someone's house be a oh, we want to make their house look kind of shoddy, uh, be ostracized from the town. That's going to help kind of make your town kind of come to life. So maybe make a little shack way off in the corner that is nobody wants to be in. A little tiny shack too with that. Just something simple. Boarded up. So I'm gonna have like one side of the roof, and then it's gonna have some beaten path that kind of come off of it. Mostly swept away by the grass. So you can kind of do different layers on that. Kind of stretch it out to the main, back to the main road. Swap those colors. So other things that I consider if I'm going to make a higher level map, I'm going to want to be using maybe a lot more buildings. I'm going to be clustering them closer together. This is really good for showing a lot more detail, but if we're doing some of the other maps you guys have been in where the city is, you know, maybe a mile or more across, I'm going to use much smaller boxes to kind of symbolize where people live. You can do that by basically making a series of structures next to each other. We'll start off with a couple of boxes. The cool thing about this is that unlike like a BMP, all of these boxes are interactable. So I can grab these and I can put them next to the road any way I want. And like, let's say I'm putting them against a road that is kind of curving. We've got a lot of options here for just kind of putting them next to each other. Houses back in the medieval times weren't necessarily built with any kind of unions in place, so people would just build them right up against the road. They would kind of flow flush with the road, and you'd very seldomly see towns where they were two houses thick, where there wasn't like a central access point to the main road. Otherwise, that would be really bad for business. So I'm going to like give them just a little bit of space in between here.
So these are just houses that aren't super relevant, like don't have anyone in particular in them.
Right. And if I wanted to make them more particular, this has been one of the easiest ways I've been able to find works in any game.
Gotcha.
And so then you guys, when you're playing, you guys can be like, "Hey, what's in Building 5?" Here you can go into your GM notes and you can make something happen in Building 5. These appear on the map layer, but I can go and put them on the object layer. So, or if you don't want them to see what it is, one of the things that I've been practicing in my games has been like tracking things. So I'm currently on the GM layer, and I'm gonna just start here, and I'm gonna say that this is like, and it's players are not gonna be able to see this information, but this is gonna give me clues to what I'm working with when I'm playing the game. And then maybe later on they're going to get an achievement where they're going to explore the area in complete detail. And should they do that, I'll give them
Make some achievements for your players, folks. Great way to bonus XP. Gives them the satisfaction, of achieving something.
Surprisingly, it has gone over really well. People playing in my games when I'm using like Fog of War, they want to know what's on the map. They want to see everything that's they can see, everything that's conceivable. They want to know those options.
Yeah, the good old mapping the realm achievement, right?
It's a rewarding feeling for a reason. So if you don't have a Fog of War turned on, go ahead and just like click it. It'll prompt you right off the bat if you want to use the advanced or just the regular. Um, Reveal areas is a little finicky, but let's say we start the players off. We're going to give them an area that they can start off and see. And then as they explore, I'm going to kind of cut out how far their vision can be. This helps for a GM who has the pause or non-pause function in Roll20. This is really useful. You can't pause the game like you can in Foundry. At no point in time can I stop the players from moving their tokens.
Mm-hmm.
However, if they move their tokens into the Fog of War, they're not going to be able to see where they're going, and it's going to be pretty difficult for them to sometimes find their token. They're going to have to like scan and drag to try and find where their token is. So that's why I prefer to use that method. Let's say that oh yeah, you can't scroll while in this option. Roll20, if you're watching. You should be able to pan the right click button. Should allow you to do, notice how I can't pan the screen at all. Has to be, yeah.
That's weird.
You can write that up as your complaint with Roll20, John. So as they would uncover these areas, I would show them, oh, look, you found, this particular district. And
there is Roll20 does have the advanced Fog of War too that should work with token vision as well.
They absolutely do. I think it's not nearly as effective as Foundry, and as you can see, I do have dynamic lighting as an option because I'm paying for Roll20. I didn't like it. I didn't like it one bit. If you're struggling with having too many GM overlays, you can always just go to the opacity and kind of just make them all disappear. Or if you want it to be, I want to see what the players are seeing. That's what the players are seeing versus, now you can see what the players are seeing. Now you can see what you have in store for them. And then if you want to put this back onto the token layer, you can do that. All this looks a little bit darker because they haven't, seen it on the fog of war kind of area. And you would just like uncover this as your characters move along. Once they enter the building, they can see everything inside the building. I usually do just like a little bit of an outline for them there. So that's an example of some real quick buildings. Maybe do some furniture. What do you think, John?
Yeah, spend a few minutes on furniture. Now, both of our approaches to map making that we've shown here are heavily depend on like virtual tabletops, right? How would you do something like this, or how would your approach change even if you were playing an in-person game?
So the reason why I do my art this way is because of how I evolved to draw maps.
Okay.
I was doing one game for my group a week, just one game a week.
Mm-hmm.
And since Roll20, I got up to 3 games a week. That was a bit too much. Now I'm just running currently one game, and I've got another game like set up in advance. And Roll20 has made it so much easier. Not just Roll20, but Foundry and all of virtual tabletops have made it so much easier to play and get into games that there's way more content. So I used to sit down and draw.
Mm-hmm.
So like throughout the week, I would do different maps, and I would kind of focus on where the players were. I was way more focused on world maps and dungeons, and there was very little in between. Until the party started staying in a city for a while. I would usually have like one focal point, a 9 by 12, that's the standard paper size. Just like one sheet of paper would show, and then I would draw the size of the city based on, so if it was a small city, I would zoom in and kind of blow things up. And if it was a large city that fit on that one sheet, I would shrink it down.
But would you draw them like this? Would you draw them like with box circles like this, or would you do something different in your approach?
My artistic style is, yeah, I would definitely lots of shading, lots of lines. I could show some samples of like how Roll20 has kind of shaped that and how I've tried to adapt to that. I would have drawing boxes is easy to do here because as you can see, I threw down a bunch of different shapes, random shapes, and then I was able to line them up wherever I wanted. If I was doing this with pen and paper, each individual house that I made, I would have to draw them out. And I would definitely draw them out this way, but there's a little bit more thought process behind it versus just the players are going through so much content, and I want them to constantly be able to explore these things. So,
gotcha. For me, I kind of mentioned this in a previous video. My approach to map making in virtual tabletops versus in person is entirely different. I don't use very many maps in person. If I do, I only use them for battle maps. I typically don't draw like town maps, or I'll usually have like a world map that I give to the players in their campaign handout at the beginning of the campaign. For city, and even in virtual tabletop, I don't always draw city maps. Usually, I just kind of theater mine those. Because in my opinion, the city is the least interesting part of the game. If players are hanging out too long in the city, they're doing something wrong, in my opinion. The fun part of, in my opinion, the fun part of an adventure is outside the city, right? Whether that's in a dungeon, in the wilds, and whatever the exploration takes them. So I don't typically focus too much on the cities. But even outside of, even like in dungeons and whatnot, I don't have the luxury of all this digital art and everything usually when I'm playing in person. So I'll usually take advantage of like those ChessX battle maps, and I will just roughly draw the lay of the land for each battle on the fly, like as I need it. So like if the players are, fighting some goblins in the forest, I'll just really roughly draw the general area and whatever obstacles are there around. So it's much more crude, I guess you could say. But because of that, I found that my planning of a session takes much longer when playing online on a virtual tabletop versus, playing an in-person game, which for a GM can be kind of a pain. But
It's a labor of love.
yeah,
So I mean, I think I spend the same amount of time per game drawing. I've just gotten better at Roll20, so now it's not as difficult as it was before.
yeah.
Uh,
For me, it's like I don't know. For me personally, as a GM, I find the most fun in the world building, not the map building, but the world building and the general like story design than I do in just making maps. Like I've never been a huge fan of just making maps, like in anything, whether it's video games or um, tabletop RPGs or whatever. That's just not interesting to me, really. So I've always,
yeah,
for me personally, map making has always been kind of like a something. Oh, like I don't really want to do this, but I have to do it. So
it's a chore for
yeah,
you.
it's a chore for me for sure. So, um, I mean, taking all those shortcuts like I described are definitely handy for me because I don't, it gets it done faster, and but still gives it the quality that people expect of virtual tabletop games. I think that nowadays, if you're playing an online game, people expect your maps to be up to par. You know what I mean?
There's
So
definitely a layer of expectation. Definitely. Uh,
so
I've gone into some people's games where it's just a white screen and they have a couple pieces of art uploaded,
yeah,
and it makes combat grueling because you already have a grid to work with, and then they don't have the map to scale. And when they plop the players down, it's general and vague. And in a game where the damage that you're dealing is based off of range, melee range, attacks of opportunity, the spells, creature fleeing, and then you can't put down those assets onto that spot. Um, I feel like the pressure is definitely there to have all that stuff in that game. And when I was drawing my maps for, like I said, I did a lot of world maps and villages. My dungeons, I would take my minis, the circular bases, and that was my 5 foot circle. And I would measure everything out so that the minis could be on those hand drawn maps. So that
yeah.
way
That's
we
one
would
nice thing
have.
about the Chessex grid is that I don't have to draw the grid; it's just there and it's already the size, so I can just draw my maps around the grid, kind of deal.
I got pretty good at drawing to scale. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah. But we're nearing the end of this one. Did you have anything else you wanted to show on this particular map? Looks like you're building a little forge here, a little blacksmith area.
Hmm. I mean,
I guess
I
that's
didn't, I
that's
didn't
something
really.
else I've kind of started doing, and I actually, admittedly, never really did this in my in-person games. So I completely could have, but since I started doing virtual tabletop games, one thing I have noticed I've started doing is adding books or journals and stuff throughout the world that players can find and learn a bit more about the history of the world and or maybe specific NPCs or whatever. Very much inspired by games like Elder Scrolls and whatnot, where you can go to a bookshelf and maybe find one or two books in there. Um, I don't do it for every bookshelf because that's a lot of things to prep, but for like areas that have rich in history, I'll usually throw in a few books for players to find. Sometimes I make them obvious. Sometimes they're hidden and take like a perception check or something or an investigation check or whatever to come across. But yeah, I think it really adds a lot of flavor to things, and it is a little easier to do universal tabletops where you can add like drag like journal entries onto the map that players can just like click on themselves versus in an in-person game you either have to have some kind of token there to represent it's there, or if you want it hidden you have to have players just train them, I guess, to make perception checks when they enter a room with a bookshelf and make sure that you as the GM explain that there's bookshelves in the room when you're giving the description of the area. So it's just a little more difficult to do in person, but it's totally doable, and it's something when I start playing in person again, I'll probably start incorporating somehow. I don't
I've
know.
noticed that
You've been in
games
a
that
couple of my games
I
where I've had those. What'd you think of that idea?
finding lore books, it hits the exact same way I feel when I'm playing Elder Scrolls and I find what is that, the Tome of the Lusty Aragonian Maiden.
Yeah.
Um, it hits the same way because I feel like you put a way more time into this game, and I think like on a superficial level, some people just come into a game and they just want to clank dice.
Hmm.
Um, there's those players. Nothing wrong with that. There's the power gamers who come into the game with the thought process that we're going to battle and I'm going to beat the system. And then there's a group of players, there's a percentage out there population wise, but it just depends on who you have in your game. And I think before, some of the people who were coming to play were just like, this is a social event. That's what they were there for, was to have something to talk about, drink. We were meeting at a bar basically. So it was, the most people who were showing up was for the social event, and I'm a player who's here for the story. If the story is boring, I'm checking out. Like mentally, I'm gonna be like, what am I here for? So when I'm playing a game and it has lore books and I can explore them and read them and I can like move around and like your maps go to them, that's the part that's going to get me the most interested. It's going to keep me the most engaged. And everybody has a certain degree inside them if they like, the social environment part of it, a percentage, and they like a certain percentage. Nobody is, 99% power gamer.
Right.
Right. There might be, but I get way more fulfillment out of a really empowering story. And when I'm reading a book about orcs in your game and like where they come from and who was using what items to slay these orcs, that tells me this is way more realistic, and it's going to shape how my character is going to interact. Because before I might have just found a junk item and I might have just sold it, but I read some lore about it and now I know how important that orc weapon is, that orc slaying weapon.
Right.
And so that's gonna.
I think Paizo did an. We've mentioned this in the past as well, but I think Paizo did an incredible job with the idea of artifacts and relics in Pathfinder 2e specifically to kind of aid you in adding those story elements to weapons in a more mechanical way. And I think it's an awesome idea. But we are running right up on the end of the show, so I guess I wanted to just close out here by saying that these are just the way that we do maps, right? There's no right or wrong way necessarily. We thought we'd give you guys a glimpse of how we do it, and again, we might take vastly different approaches for different kinds of maps. Like I don't do dungeon maps the same way I do village maps or world maps, for instance. Jack, on the other hand, does a lot of their maps a similar kind of way, right? In fact, a lot of their maps are all built into one giant world. So like they're showing you a village right now, but in his Tagasea game, this village is just one small section of a massive map that exists and has a bunch of villages in it, and a bunch of dungeons in it. So it's two very different approaches, and they're not the only two approaches. There's many other styles as well. So hopefully you guys have learned something or taken something valuable out of this. Let us know if you want to see more stuff like this in the future. We'll probably do another map making one where maybe I focus on villages and Jack focuses on world or something, or something along those lines.
I'd like to show Aranax. I think that'd be great because sci-fi doesn't get enough love, and I think people would feel a little more comfortable with throwing sci-fi games down if there's more people doing content and creating for them. So, like an example, Starfinder or 40K. How would you go about making maps for a game like that? Right?
Yeah, sure. Like, I think Starfinder. Generally, you can take the similar approaches to like Pathfinder 2e, but games like Call of Cthulhu or Fate take a very different style of map because they're not built around the idea of maps, right? So
your dungeon set that you're using, what's it called? I really liked it. What's it called?
The dungeon set, the software or the tile set?
Software, the program that you were using.
Dungeon Draft.
Dungeon Draft.
Yeah.
Does Dungeon Draft have a sci-fi option?
So
it has sci-fi.
Dungeon Draft can do anything. You just have to load the tile sets in there if you want. So
right. So are there tile sets available for Dungeon Draft?
That there's sci-fi tile sets out there for sure.
So
yeah, we could totally
people out there who are looking to do sci-fi options for your game, there are tile sets out there for fantasy and sci-fi as well. And Roll20 can be whatever It's I just showed you just basic drawings and the color palette. Once you get used to finding where the colors are, you can pretty much draw anything you want. So I think if you guys are interested in seeing something maybe a little more sci-fi, where John and I draw a galaxy, starships, or something interactive, let us know what you guys think.
Yeah. So what do we have for next week? Do you recall off the top of your head?
Off the top of my head, let me check my calendar. I actually don't see it on Google. What did we choose?
I don't remember
My
either.
map is still, are you still showing my screen?
No, I switched.
Okay. Um, so we have. Um,
Oh, you don't have the. You're on the wrong one.
so we've got choosing ancestries
Ah,
for
yes.
your
Choosing
world.
ancestries for your world. Okay, that's
I
gonna be a good one.
am excited to do this one because we've already run a few campaigns just in Pathfinder alone between just John and I, and we have talked about this before
Mm-hmm.
about how did you decide to cast these orcs in your campaign or the ant race that you threw in yours, and like why I decided to throw in Fae into mine,
Mm-hmm.
choosing ancestries for your world. So
Yeah, and this isn't
you
just
know
like, I mean, what player ancestries are allowed is part of it, right? But it's also like, how do you choose, you know, what ancestries, even enemy ancestries, are going to be in different areas um, of your game, right? So
Mhm.
yeah, that'll be a fun one. Yeah, I think that's the end of this show. I hope you guys enjoyed it. This will be up on YouTube. Within the next couple days. I did forget again to announce at the beginning. Make sure you hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already. It really helps us out, get those numbers up, so we can start getting more recommendations to other people and really keep the momentum up. Um, we also have a Twitter and a Mastodon that we post updates to regularly. We have a website that we post various things. We're going to be posting Jack's um, uh, religion he did as soon as we finalize some art for it. That'll be coming the next couple days. Yeah, so I think that things are growing good. So till next time, happy gaming.